The following is a special presentation of Tony Kurre Radio.
Welcome back to another installment of Spy for Rent. Spy, the number 4 rent, or spyforrent.com, 790-3051. This show airs at least 5 days a week on Tony Kurre Radio on the TKR app. You can listen to it as many times. We have thousands of people who listen throughout the week, over 100,000 folks who listen to our 18 different podcast shows. And of course, after it airs right here on TKR, you can go watch it right here on our YouTube channel on Tony Kurre Radio, or you can also, of course, go back and listen to it wherever you get your favorite podcasts. We're available on every major indice. Special guest this week, Matt Butts, who is, of course, a divorce attorney and also you do custody, I'm assuming. Is custody and divorce attorney, is that kind of the same thing? I mean, they kind of go hand in hand, correct?
I mean, they go hand in hand. It's in the same ballpark.
Yeah.
Yes.
Welcome back to the big show. And of course, Kurre down on the bottom of the screen has got his glasses on. We won't use his last name just in case, so we don't know if he's doing any work today. But he's going to be incognito, but he's got questions. By the way, info@tonykurreradio.net. When we had Jeff Hammock on, of course, also with Spy for Rent on 4 or 5 years ago, we did this Love, Lust, and Life thing. He used to do these wonderful stories, these funny stories. He is Mr. Stealthy. It's amazing how he could show up in a room and be there for like an hour and a half. I'm not kidding you. And I know what Jeff looks like. He would be there for like an hour and a half, and I never saw the guy. I've never saw the guy. So Kurre, we're going to let you wear the glasses, and we're not going to mention your last name. Let's go. In our first show, Kurre, we really kind of broke down a lot of different questions from obviously a lot of listeners, and what exactly you do from a surveillance standpoint, from a GPS standpoint, the technology that has changed over the last several years. Of course, now everyone's got rings and everyone's got cameras. I think I heard something like there's 14 billion cameras in the world now because we all have a cell phone and everything else. But I specifically want to talk about Matthew being on the show today because in my particular case, I know that I used Spy for Rent. Because I was going through a divorce myself, and quite frankly, I never thought in a million years I'd ever use a private investigator. But when you're going through that, you just want to make sure that you have every gun loaded and everything pointed in the right direction. And so you're willing to go to any length to get any information you possibly can, because quite frankly, at least from a male standpoint, I kind of feel like women are really smart. I feel like they're very organized. She came in with boxes of stuff, and I had one piece of paper, when I was going in, and I'm thinking to myself, it was all right here. So us men, we're smart in different kind of ways, right? We're a little bit more primitive and better at other things than women are. Can you talk a little bit about, from a divorce standpoint, Matt, I'll start with you first, why you would hire a Spy for Rent? And normally, is it something where, hey, listen, we've done this, let's go ahead and because I know that we also, I know sometimes people like to do a psychiatric test on each other. I mean, they'll throw it all out there. And I guess it depends on what your situation is with your potential ex. But can you talk about why you would hire a Spy for Rent?
Absolutely. So when I file a complaint for divorce, the first thing I need to do is get it served. And if this is not one of those situations where everybody's coming in and everything's amicable, if we know that we're going to have to go to court and get somebody served on this, I call Spy for Rent. And actually, I send them an email. I say, hey, can you serve this on this person at this time? And at that point, I want them kind of locked in with my case. They've done some work on the case, and then I want them to do more work on the case if need be. It's not always necessary to do an entire deep dive into somebody's business. Sometimes it is. But so when it is, I go to Kurre and I'm just like, hey, I either need this, or just cast this wide net and tell me what you come back with, just depending on the situation. And
Kurre, you get the email, you're looking at it. And what's the first question you have for Matthew when you get this email?
If he's got the date and time, that's good. Sometimes it's easy. Sometimes it's, if we got to find the person to serve them, what's their date of birth, their information, so we can try to find them, look up their vehicles, their place of employment, because some people don't want to get served, and it's going to happen eventually anyways. Even if you got to do it by publication, I got to write an affidavit that I went here and et cetera, went through these links. But that's my question. But a lot of times, like he said, it's cut and dry. Sometimes you don't have to do as much of a deep dive. And we always want to be efficient with things. If we don't have to deep dive, why do it? Why spend the money?
Yeah. A lot of people would say it's so easy now just to Google someone's name and get almost every piece of information you think is out there. But that's not true. Is it, Corey? I mean, there's a lot more deeper avenues you can go, and you obviously know how to go down those avenues.
Yeah. Google, if you know how to Google or use that tool. So Google is a tool, just like any other database is a tool, and you've got to know how to manipulate the information to get what you want. You can get a lot of stuff from that, but is it accurate? Where is that information coming from? Where is Google pulling that from? Google wants to give you the information. Their whole business model is whatever you're searching, they want to give you that information. If not, they're going to keep on pushing another page forward until most people are clicking on that page. But there's certain databases that we can use, like driver's license information is not public to everybody. You've got to have a permissible use. Same thing with banking information assets. You've got to make sure you're FCRA compliant when you're looking through those things. And you have to have a license to get some of the database research. But a lot of things are public record too, but it's nuanced. And do you know what you're looking for? And how to manipulate those different databases.
I hope I'm speaking to the majority of people listening to the show right now, and you have not gone through a divorce. Unfortunately, at least half of us have. I'm one of those people that thought never in a million years I would have gone through it. Was married for 18, 19 years, and like most guys thought things were going pretty well, and all of a sudden they weren't. But there's this thing, Matt, called the discovery process. I have nightmares of, I can't even watch the Discovery Channel because of that word discovery. That was the worst thing. If you're like a person who hates taxes and have to go through piles of crap, and all of a sudden you're being asked to go back through 10, 20 years of the stuff, and everything is out there. Can you talk a little bit about the discovery process and how Spy for Rent can be instrumental in using that for discovery?
Absolutely. I'm going to tell you, it's not very much fun for us either, but I do understand that it is very taxing on the client, because in discovery, what we do, the two primary, there are different avenues and tools that we can use, but the two primary things that we use are interrogatories and requests for production. The interrogatories, we send questions that are answered under oath, and that's pretty straightforward. It's invasive, but it's straightforward. The request for production of documents is give me every financial document that's relevant to you. And sometimes they go back to the whole history of the marriage. I object to that lots of times. The standard on a long marriage is generally about 5 years, but you can ask for more depending on the situations and circumstances. But yeah, it's very taxing. And lots of times you can answer that question with, hey, she has equal access to these records as I do, but you still got to get them for your lawyer. So you've got to come up with all that stuff. And we get pretty creative sometimes in the documents we ask for. Nowadays we're asking for Facebook records and all your messages and all your social media stuff. And if we think that there's something going on in that regard. So it's very taxing.
Let's dig a little deeper here, since I've already gone through this process and I don't have to do it again. Thank the Lord. Let's put it on somebody else. Normally, if you're going through a divorce, and in my particular case, I got married in 2002. And so all of the social media stuff, all the Facebook stuff, all that started happening after I got married. Okay. For people who are kind of in the same boat that I am, and say been married the last 20 or 30, 40 years, and all of a sudden they're thinking about, hey, listen, this may be a situation where I no longer want to be with her. I no longer want to be with him. I think a lot of people get in and they go, holy crap, what the hell did I get myself into? Unless it's just an amicable situation where you're both growing and there's 1,000 cuts and you both decide you don't want to be with each other, that's fine. That's great if it's amicable. But can you just talk about the in-depth part you're talking about because Corey and I did a whole show on social media, and that alone, it can be enough to find some documentation that perhaps you're looking for.
Right. And I just want to kind of speak to that expectation that you were talking about too, of what it is versus what you may think it is. I had somebody come into my office a few weeks ago and say, well, this should be a slam dunk case, shouldn't it? I said, there is no such thing. There is no such thing. This is going to get ugly. It's going to get frustrating. And I need you to know that on the front end. So, because what I'm doing is we need to calculate child support. I need to know what the finances are. Generally, people aren't honest about their income in court. So you got to go and you've got to figure out where that money's coming from, where it's going. Look at phone records. Are there any 1 a.m. phone calls going on? Who is that to? And lots of times it is kind of a fishing expedition. Sometimes you have general direction and the ways that you're going to look. Other times it is, I'm going to look at this big old pile of documents and see if I find a smoking gun. Sometimes it exists, sometimes it doesn't. But in doing all of that, and I'm getting a framework for the ins and outs, the nuts and bolts of this marriage and how it actually worked. And that helps me better present for trial.
Kurre's with Spy for Rent. That's the name of the show, Spy for Rent. Thousands and thousands of folks have used them. They do everything from GPS tracking to surveillance, child custody, fraudulent insurance stuff. You name it, they've got you covered. They are the best of the best of the best. Of course, Jeff, a good friend of mine, works with Kurre as well. Kurre works with Jeff. Spy for Rent, spy the number 4rent.com or spyforrent.com. 790-3051, 790-3051. We're blessed to have Matt Butts on as well, who's a divorce attorney. And does a fine job himself. Thank you very much. Kurre, when you get a phone call or an email from someone like Matt, and I'm sure you've dealt with a lot of divorce attorneys and other attorneys as well, do you kind of say, okay, what primarily are you looking for? Or is it more like a wide net? Hey, listen, I'm going through a new case now. He believes that maybe she's cheating or maybe she's running some money amok, this, that, and the other. Does he kind of hone in for you to tell you what you're primarily looking for? Or would you rather not know and discover it yourself? Because sometimes you could find some things that perhaps you weren't looking for.
I would always ask the attorney what they're looking for, because I want to give all the information they need and none of it they don't. Like I said, if we're going in rabbit holes, spending money on stuff that doesn't work, it's just not worth it. And, he knows what that judge wants to see, what's going to actually affect the case. So if I go on a rabbit hole, it might be good, you might find some more information, but if it's not going to help them out in their case, then why spend that money? Yep. So I always like to see what's the objectives. Okay, let's hit the objectives. Now, from those objectives, we might discover something just like Facebook. So we get into Facebook. Okay. Kurre, can you look at this for me to see if that all the information was given? Okay. It looks like Facebook says that some disappearing messages weren't given. Okay. Then Matt can file, a motion, get the phone. So we get the phone, we look there. Oh, they're texting so-and-so. Oh, there's videos of things on here that prove cheating. So we can get that if needed within the case. But I always want to be efficient, and I just want to do what the attorney wants me to do on the case. I don't want to waste the client's money.
If you get a chance to go back and listen to one of our previous shows, and we've done 4 or 5 already, listen to our social media show. It's amazing. It's crazy, Matt, how many people get on social media, look at me, trying to get all the followers they can, or willing to post just basically anything that's going to get a follow. They'll refollow something, perhaps if they haven't looked the entire thread down, which I think has happened to a lot of us. And then we're even talking about situations where I backed off big time because I got to the point where I got tired of being hacked. I felt like, a lot of people were like, listen, if you're getting hacked, you ain't doing a good job. You know what I mean? And I just got to the point where I just was like, you know what? I'm just going to keep it purely business. I'm not going to do any more personal situations. I was on the radio for 40 years because if you just listen to my show, I would share personal things all the time, but I knew people weren't recording it before social media. Talk a little bit about from the social media standpoint. Is that the first thing you look at, first of all, because it seems like everyone's like, look at me. And it's amazing what people are willing to post.
Oh my goodness. Number one, I have to say as a general rule, never post about your case on any social media outlet ever for any reason, period. Number two, people are going to do that and not just about their case. Sometimes they'll come out and they'll say, oh, I really sucked it to him in court and I did this and I did that. And the first thing I do is go screenshot that. So, but also you don't want to give away too much information about your own life, because you know that if you're going through a divorce or custody case, that your life is under a microscope.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So it's okay to post things. It's okay to be very general, but the world at large is not your friend. And they will use what you post against you. So be very, very careful in how you portray yourself. It could be very innocent. But if it's, we can kind of twist things, and we can look a little deeper and say, well, it's maybe not as wholesome as you meant it to be, but then you got to deal with that. You just don't want to have to deal with it, honestly.
Yeah. And I speak from experience. Everything's out there, man. And something that I may post, you don't know where my inflection is. You don't know what I was thinking at the same time. They're just seeing a picture of something and they don't even read it. And they're like, okay, boom. And the next thing you know, you're having to explain something. Corey, can you give me an example? And Jeff he used to do Spy for Rent stories. They were fantastic, man. The Ice Cube bondage was, of course, one of our favorite stories of all time. And we're not going to ask you to go through that story again. I don't even know if you were there at the time, but can you give me an example of when you were looking for something on somebody in a divorce case, but found something totally different than what you were expecting? And you're like, what in the world have I stumbled upon here?
So one time we're going to a case and we're doing surveillance on an individual, and they thought they were cheating. So we're following, and the guys, going to weird parking lots, going to hotels, doing things, and, but I never could find a paramour. And then, you start looking at the people that he's hanging out with, running the tags, running their background checks on all these people. And they've got drug trafficking charges, so, and ended up the wife found the drugs and stuff too. And sure enough, he was selling drugs. And his business, he was able to move around a lot. He was a business owner and he bounced from place to place. So it was easy for him to make excuses about where he would be. But her worst fear was that he was cheating, but it ended up being a bad case too, because they didn't want to bring the children around somebody that's dealing drugs. Or you dealing with these people, if they get mad or something happens, that's not good for her safety or the children's safety. So
wow.
That was one of the weirdest times.
Yeah, and that's listening to his stories, a lot of them seem to be guys jumping out of vans in the middle of alleyways at 3:00 in the morning, and I'm like, she thinks you're cheating. He was always set up outside of a gym somewhere. Someone all of a sudden decided they want to start working out at 1:00 in the morning. My dad used to say nothing good happens after midnight. He was so right. We have more fun after midnight, but something normally isn't going right or legal after midnight. Matthew Butts, divorce attorney, does fantastic work. Great to have him on the show. And of course, Corey here from Spy for Rent, Spy, the number 4rent.com, 790-3051, 790-3051. They've worked well together in the past, and we're taking your email questions too. info@TonyCurryRadio.net, info@TonyCurryRadio.net. You said something, Corey, earlier, and I think a lot of people are like, well, whatever. You're like, listen, I don't want to waste your money. Anyone that's dealt with an attorney in the past, realizes that every time you pick up the phone, it's going to cost you $75. Every time you send an email, it's going to probably cost you $50. And yeah, it mounts up, and that's why you get a retainer, blah, blah, blah. I truly believe when you say this, because you've got so much work going on, you're like, listen, you just want to bust a case and move on to the next one. You've got plenty of work. You don't have to be billing by the hour on anybody, which I really like. How long typically would your typical divorce case, if you're looking for some type of information, whether it's cheating, a money trail, drugs, whatever, how typically long would you be investigating somebody, and what would it cost somebody to use Spy for Rent?
So a typical case. So it's cheaper if you can give me a lot of information. If I have to find the information and fish, then it's not going to, it's going to be more expensive. But say, we know they're not here at this time of the day, or this certain, days of the week. This, we can narrow it down to maybe a couple days or something. So you're talking probably $2,000 at the cheapest right there. And a lot of cases are done. That's all that needs to be for surveillance cases. Even workers' comp insurance, the standard's usually like 2 8-hour days. They may want more after that. So you're looking at about anywhere from $1,750 to $2,000 for a simple case. That's if you give me a lot of information. But clients like to say they always do this. Well, nobody always does something. So whenever somebody tells me always, I take that with a grain of salt. And because I've been on many cases where he always goes out and drinks every Friday and Saturday. Well, and you got the proof he's not. And sometimes it takes a couple times. It's a gamble.
Yeah.
And that's something for you to talk with your attorney if that gamble is worth it. And so, like you said, I don't want to take anybody's money that doesn't need it. I want to get your case done and on to the next one. And if somebody ever has a question about Corey Fuller, or look at me, I said my last name, but anyways, about Corey you can tell them that I do honest dealings, Jeff too, that we're honest. And I think that's why a lot of the attorneys trust us, because that's the big thing is we might have to testify in court. That judge has to know that we're a trustworthy person, and we're not going to try to take money from their clients that unnecessarily. Everything that we do is just for the case and helping them out. And we don't want anything extra.
I was talking to several folks that I was going to be doing this show today because we all know each other from last week. We had a little get together where we actually spoke about some things so we could set our show up and do a really good show for everyone listening to Tony Kurre Radio and wherever you get your favorite podcast. Several people asked me to ask you, Matt, mediation. Is that a good idea? Is it something that regardless of how far apart you are, you should sit down and do mediation? I know it's kind of expensive sometimes, but talk about mediation before perhaps you'd actually hire a lawyer. Good idea or not?
Well, it really just depends. I mean, the courts push for mediation, and I understand why they do. I used to work for a judge, and it really gave me some good perspective on that, because it's a real push for people to settle their case so that they don't have to go to trial, because at the end of the day, you're always going to get more input in your case if you settle it. If it settles well, sometimes they just have to try, but mediation can help do that. I have found, at least from personal experience, that mediation is very effective with high asset divorces, things like that. When it comes to a blue collar divorce, I really have to sit down and figure out if it's worth it, because there are fewer assets, so fewer issues, but very important ones like custody. And lots of times you kind of know what you want there, right? If you're willing to do 50-50, if you're only willing to do standard, this beforehand. So while mediation is a very good thing, sometimes you can go in there and it not be very fruitful because you're so far apart that, the answer is going to be no on a few issues every time. Maybe you can whittle down some other areas, and it's really good for that. But again, if you don't have a whole lot of assets, you've just got to make the most of your time there and figure out if it's worth it to continue.
Yeah, another friend wanted me to ask you the question, are lawyers really like Democrats and Republicans? You see them arguing, you hate each other, and then at night you're seeing them share bottles of whiskey and laughing with each other and smacking each other in the back. You're like, what the hell? I just saw you guys yelling at each other. You hate each other's ideologies. And next thing you know, you're hanging out, having dinner together afterwards. Obviously, other lawyers. You're in the divorce business, so you're going to know every divorce attorney that comes in there. But I would imagine there are probably some divorce attorneys that, quite frankly, are a pain in the ass, and there are probably some that like to play fair too.
Yeah, and I was a judicial assistant for almost 3 years, so I got to meet just about every divorce attorney that comes through that court, and I know them pretty well. And we have the bar association, and we have our picnic and our Christmas party every year, and we know each other. And there's some of us who don't like each other. And there's some of us who do. For the most part, I get along with a good bit of people, and we have this understanding of, I'm not here to disrespect you. I'm not here to do any of that. I'm not even here to put on a show for my client, but I'm going to fight tooth and nail, and we're going to go to war in that courtroom, and there's going to be no hard feelings afterwards. But make no mistake, our friendship does not mean that I go easier in the courtroom. And I understand that about them as well.
Yeah.
So, not every lawyer can do that. Some lawyers take a lot of things very personally, and you can't help that. But a lot of us can see past it and say, look, I'm going to go in there and I'm going to go to war and I'm going to go as hard as I absolutely can. But at the end of the day, that doesn't mean that I have to hate you.
Yeah.
And in fact, sometimes it makes it easier if I know the other lawyer, because instead of immediately going to file things and getting ready for war, I can call them and say, hey, is there something we can do to work this out to save these people thousands of dollars? Because I'm of that mindset too, like Corey. I don't want to spend people's money if I don't have to. I only want to spend what I have to get you out as whole as I can.
There you go. Corey with Spy for Rent, spy4rent.com, or spy4rent.com. I had a couple of questions for you when I was talking to some of these people as well. One of the biggest questions I had, and it was amazing how many people actually had this idea about what you do, but they wanted to know, if you look long enough, will you find something? And my question is, we're going back now. It seems like, we're seeing these celebrity things with P. Diddy. Now, these things aren't, 15, 20 years deep, but we are finding things, particularly with our politicians, where we're going back 10, 15, 20 years ago. At what point do you stop digging? If you have an attorney who says, listen, I really think there's something going on here, and the guy or the girl in my corner here really believes that this is happening, and you're doing it and you're like, I just don't see it. At what point do you put your hands up, or do you just keep diving until the money runs out?
So it's a cost benefit analysis that you've got to run with it. And then if you're not seeing anything and you've got proof of that refutes whatever they suspect is going on, you show them that proof and let them come up with the conclusion themselves. Now, if it gets out of line and the client's just fishing for something that's not there, then eventually I've had to cut clients go and say, I can't take your money anymore. It would be unethical if I did, but you can't just say there's just one little thing that tells you that. It's more so like if you have proof that it's not happening, would be that gut feeling that you have. It's and that's when you would say it's just not here, or it's not happening right now. Now I'll give you a cohabitation case, for instance. Okay. So maybe they broke up, maybe they split up for a little bit, right? They were cohabitating and the client wasn't wrong, but right now they're not. So it's not worth paying us to right now at this moment to do this. Let's wait another 6 months. Let's wait another year. You're going to be paying alimony for a long time. So there are things that, that you can recommend so they're not spending that money. Some people have the mindset of, I don't care. I'm paying you and you're going to go do it. And, it's like, okay, yes, ma'am. Yes, sir. That's what we'll do. But this is, give them a day by day. This is what's going on. And I'm just not seeing it. So you're going to find something. It may not be what they wanted to find out, but it's going to be the truth, right? Yeah.
Matt, final question for you. And thanks again for coming on the show. You're in the club, so you're welcome to come anytime. Spy for Rent. You can hear the show wherever you get your favorite podcast. We have thousands of listeners. And of course, Kurre does a fantastic job at Spy for Rent, spy4rent.com. One of the most difficult parts, I think, of a divorce, depending on whether it was amicable or whether there was a love lost there, or maybe it was a death by 1,000 cuts, or maybe you found out he was cheating, people move on. And the one thing that I found was really interesting, and I really never thought about this, was what are some of the rules? And another friend of mine evidently was caught cheating on his wife, and the judge in this particular case, and I don't want to say who it is, but basically said, listen, no visitors after 8. Can you talk a little bit about how that goes? Because in a lot of cases, people don't want to move on. Some people don't want to date right away. Maybe they're just like, I'm over with this whole thing in a while. I just want to, keep my nose to the grindstone and just work and love my kids and pray and blah, 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 blah. Can you talk about how judges and or lawyers look at that when you're talking about cohabitation and moving on with your life with another person in the house with the other person's kids?
Yeah, I mean, some people get along pretty well. Sometimes a divorce goes on so long that both people have found other significant others. You should not date anyone while you have a divorce case going on, but we all know that it happens. So, and at that point, they don't want to play by the rules that they want to give to the other person.
Mm-hmm.
So, they can work out an agreement there. Judges, on the other hand, if it gets to the point to where it's a problem that it has to go before the judge is generally going to put some parameters in there for that type of thing. And I see that clause a whole lot. No overnight guests after this time, or you can't even introduce your significant other to the minor child for 6 months, or sometimes they say after they've met your ex, which I think is a very hard provision to really flesh out. But yeah, it really depends on how well people can co-parent. And that's what it always comes back to when there's minor children involved. And you have to put the needs of the kids over your jealousy or anything like that. At that point, the marriage is dead. You've grieved it, you've moved on, and what is absolutely best for your child. And, maybe it's not best for your child that people come in and out. Maybe your ex is dating so many people that it's like, whoa, hit the brakes. Let's just, put some parameters in. But, it's not always like that. So it just depends on the situation.
I think for folks who have not gone through this process, that's one of the things that you really need to think about before you jump in is when you're together as a couple, you want to be on the same page. You have these discussions like, well, I see it this way and I see it this way. I understand that so-and-so was smoking a cigarette. Well, how you think about it? And you want to go in unified. That's what a marriage is, a unified thing. Well, when you're no longer together, you're going to parent your way. I'm going to parent my way. You may have the kids going to bed at 10 o'clock. I have them going to bed at 8:30. It's just, and if you're going to sit there and try to look at the other side going, well, I don't like the way you're doing it, it don't work. Because you're talking about two different parents, different styles. As long as the kids are healthy with both ways, you're probably good to go. So just something to think about, and please move on. Please move on. Matt, tell people how they can get in touch with you, man.
You can call me at 205-948-4958. You can email me at mbutslaw@gmail.com. I have a website at mbutslaw.net. And I take divorce and some criminal defense cases.
There you go. And Corey, I'm going to do your job for you just to kind of keep you incognito. He's Corey with Spy for Rent. If you listen to the show in its entirety, you'll know what his last name is. We're not going to bring it up. 790-3051, 790-3051. You're so honest, it makes me sick, man. It's just unbelievable how clean you are, Corey. 790-3051, Spy for Rent, spy4rent.com or FORrent.com. We'll do it again next week, gentlemen. Appreciate you stopping in, Matt. Please don't make it a long time before you visit our show again and come back and see us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
This has been a special presentation of Tony Curry Radio.